This is our decision tree, which is a flow chart to help you determine the correct score. In the top right-hand corner, you will find the mental process. This is how you will think through the steps to determine your score. It reads, use the boxes on the left to determine the score of the performance based on elements completed and the quality of the performance. Score the equine and rider equally if they contribute equally to the results. This means that if both the equine and rider are equally responsible for the score, their scores should match. Adjust the equine and rider score as appropriate to their contribution. So if one of them is more responsible for the lower score, then they will be marked lower than the other. In the majority of the cases, there'll be no more than two numbers between the equine and rider score. The exception to this will be obstacles like a mount, dismount, or spray bottle. They could have a slightly larger gap. For example, if a rider dismounts and they drag their spurred heel across their equine's hiney and they get hung up in the stirrup and don't land square, but they are riding the perfect unicorn that we all strive for and their equine does not move, the rider will be scored much lower due to quality compared to their equine who stood perfectly still, but their score should still follow the decision tree. Pluses are awarded at the judge's discretion. Plus can be used for anything you like, such as how well the riders turned out, their effort, a good try, or good horsemanship in a bad situation. You do not give more points for a good try or good horsemanship in a bad scenario, but you can give them a plus. Determining your score. Moving to above average range. A score can be an above average only if every element was completed and the overall quality is above average. A 10 is considered a perfect performance where all elements are completed correctly and the rider demonstrates almost imperceptible or invisible cues. The performance equals the judge's vision of perfect and makes them want to say, that's how it's done. Let's discuss imperceptible or invisible cues. A rider who used their seat rather than their reins, calf pressure rather than spurs, is using imperceptible cues. They are barely noticeable, if at all. Any use of aids, such as reins, spurs, whips, sticks, or voice, is considered a perceptible cue, or ones that we see. We reserve our 9 for a performance that would be a 10, except they use slightly obvious or slightly perceptible cues. The definition of a 9 is excellent. All elements completed correctly, slight flaw, or perceptible cues are exhibited. This would be one small issue. All elements were completed, quality was very good, but for example, the rider used slightly perceptible cues such as reins, spurs, or voice. An 8 is good. All elements completed correctly. The judge observed slight flaws, but overall quality remains above average. Maybe they got slightly crooked, or there was a small cue you saw, one or two small things that affected their performance. But overall, they qualified in performance and completion for above average. Moving down to average. This would be when every element was completed with average quality, or they were missing a minor element, but at least the critical elements were completed with average to above average quality. Let's discuss what critical and minor elements are. A critical element is defined as the elements that increase in difficulty throughout all 3 levels, and elements that make each level more difficult. A minor element is not connected to another element and is the same for each level, such as an instruction to stop at the end cone or replace the item before exiting. You can see that the instructions for the Spanish pole say from start cone, obtain pole, place one end of the pole in the center of the circle, holding opposite end of the pole, walk, trot, or lope a complete circle. This is the critical element because this is the element or maneuver that increases in difficulty for each level. You can also see that replace the pole is the same for each level, so it would be considered a minor element. So let's take the Spanish pole obstacle, for example. If they picked up the pole and placed it in the center of the circle, trotted the full circle, and when they went to replace the pole, they dropped the pole, the critical element of trotting the circle holding the pole was completed, but the minor element of replacing the pole was not completed, and so this would prevent them from being above average. Let's consider another example, a turn on the forehand. With a turn on the forehand or turn on the hind obstacle, we want to see one foot remain relatively in place as the opposite end maneuvers around. In this video, you will see a 360-degree turn on the fore. They keep one foot in place for half of the turn, pick it up and reposition, keep it in place for the next quarter of the turn, then pick it up and reposition, and keep it in place for the last quarter of the turn. They did complete the 360 degrees. We did see them keep their foot in place, but it required some repositioning, and maybe they got a little off center. You would consider the critical element completed, but it would affect their quality. So they would not be placed in above average, but they could be placed in average. Okay, returning back to the decision tree. A 7 is almost good, the high end of average, considered a solid score. Quality issues prevent overall obstacle from appearing above average. You have a 7 when there's just one tiny thing keeping them from scoring above average. Maybe they completed all the critical elements with above average quality, but they missed the minor element of the stop at the end cone. A 6 is average, better than okay, not as good as almost good. They got their critical elements completed, but there were things they could have done better, and there were things they could have done worse to stay in average. A 5 is okay, the low end of average. They got it done with quality issues, mostly complete and mostly sufficient quality. Basically, they got it done and they completed the critical elements with okay quality. What we mean by mostly complete and mostly sufficient quality is that minor elements could have been missed, or the quality was okay and just enough to be considered in the average range. Moving down to partial. Critical elements not completed, or a low percentage of completion or quality, or judging stop due to time, safety, or a voluntary dismount. A 4 would be close but no cigar, high end of partial credit. Quality was below average. An example would be the 360-degree turn on the fore or hind. If you never saw any foot placement and they just turned around in a circle, this is not a turn on the fore or a turn on the hind. And both the equine and rider should be placed in the partial credit range because the critical elements were not completed. 3 is not pretty. A small percentage got done, or a small percentage was quality. In the case of the Spanish pole, if the equine walks up to the pole, bops it with their nose, and knocks it down, then the rider is done. You cannot reset the obstacle for them, and they cannot dismount and pick up the pole. That would be considered a voluntary dismount, and you would be done judging at that point. 2, bless your heart. Almost nothing completed or almost all of it was low quality. So if they got past go and touched the obstacle, they would have a score of 2-2 for engaging with the obstacle. Moving down to ones. The score would be considered a 1-1 if they only got past start and did not engage with the obstacle. Pass go, but no elements were completed other than passing the start point. Both the equine and the rider get a score of 1. The judge may award a plus to the rider and or the equine. So for example, if they got past the cone and they don't touch the rope, or they can't get to the bridge and they either time out or have to be called off before getting to the bridge, this is a 1-1 score. Please comment clearly on the scorecard that they only got past go. Now down to 0. There are 3 scenarios where a team would get a 0-0 score. The first is that the rider does not attempt or chooses to pass the obstacle. The second is that the team can't get past the start point. This will happen. If they cannot get past the start cone and keep trying, be prepared to call them off. The third is if there's a fall of the rider and or the equine within the obstacle start and end point. Zeros is defined as no elements were completed. Both the equine and the rider get zeros. With all 0-0 scores, please comment clearly why it is a 0-0 score on the scorecard. Judge may award a plus to the rider and or the equine for these scenarios. This concludes the decision tree, the ETS Judge's Guide to Scoring video.